What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to Zero Access Footy, episode number 12. And today I am very excited because alongside my beautiful co-host, Behm Gaddy, otherwise known as the Premiership Quarter.
Thank you very much for calling me beautiful. I appreciate that very much.
Of course, anytime. But we have got him, obviously, as our co-host, as our usual co-host. But we have an interview, our first interview today, who obviously you're not seeing him now, but will show up after our preview here our review of round 9. We are going to have a look at that, and then we are going to be chatting with Dylan Alexander, the AFL draft expert on YouTube. We had the awesome pleasure of being able to have a sit down and chat with him regarding all things draft. Well,
you did.
I did. Unfortunately, Behm is under the weather.
I am sick as a dog. So I'm pushing through for this, but unfortunately not interviewing Dylan Alexander yet.
Yes.
Yet.
The hope is that we will be able to do it again sometime soon. But let's have a look at how round 9 went, and some goods and some bads.
Some very goods and some very bads.
Yes, so first off, we're going to look at number 1, our Thursday night matchup at Optus Stadium. Freo being beaten by the Pies, a Pies team that 1 had rested some players and 2 had some players get injured during the game, and they still couldn't get on top. I am not even going to worry about Collingwood for this one. Fremantle, what does this mean for them? What are you kind of seeing about this now? Because I'm willing to write them off from finals after this. I feel like this was an absolute easy chance for them to pick up a win.
Well, it should have been an easy game, given the amount of players the Pies rested. And I had them winning by 21 points. And unfortunately, their defense lacked really, really poorly. And for a really talented backline, it just has not been functioning very well. You look at 34 entries, 34 inside 50s. Scored 22 times.
Yep. It's just not acceptable.
That is literally bottom 4 stuff. That's not even as bad as West Coast. That's putrid. So with a bit of a faster ball movement style, it's clear that their backline just cannot support them at all. And so if you're looking at how they played, it just wasn't good enough.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the baseline of it. I think Freo they've just disappointed us from where we expected them to be. We thought we'd see a step up. We've actually seen a step back, and that's very disappointing, just as a neutral fan, really. Yep. Saints being beaten by the Blues, unfortunately, by 15 points.
Spuds game.
You saw this one coming, didn't you?
I actually didn't.
Really? I thought you had tipped him.
I tipped Saints.
Maybe the occasion made you think so, but unfortunately the Blues take it in a game that, I mean, it kind of shows the level. I feel like this is the best or the most accurate way of viewing both sides, right? They're both about middle of the table, and it seems the Blues just have their number at the moment. And if I check the ladder here, I think it's pretty much the way the ladder is playing out. Yeah, so Carlton in 10th, Saints in 12th in the middle. Funny enough, Freo. It's definitely looking like a bit of a looking out rather than being in type of year. To be fair, in 9th position is Essendon, so there's a spot they could potentially go up. But Essendon, funny enough, have 5 wins out of 8.
They haven't beaten anyone above them, though. Yeah. It's all teams below them.
That is fair. But I think go for it, sorry.
Yeah, so for Carlton, we all know how good Wiedering is. We know how good how much he carries their backline. But I think you've got to understand how good Silvani has been this year, how good McGovern had been after the first 3 or 4 weeks, and how good Nick Haynes has turned into of a player.
Thank God.
They have been fantastic in the last few weeks. So you've got to applaud that. Their midfield, numbers-wise, wasn't great this week, but I just thought they were a lot cleaner. They weren't slipping over. They weren't fumbling with the ball, whereas Saints midfielders were. And we could not kick inside 50 either. Genuinely looked really, really poor.
Yeah.
We looked like a team that wasn't targeting kickers, yet we have been. So I'm a bit frustrated by that.
And that loss makes it 4 out of the last 5. So definitely a lot to look at now from a St Kilda perspective, because this team was looking at a fantastic start to the season with their win against Geelong. And now they see themselves under 500, closer to the bottom 4 than the top 8, or about right in the middle. So it's definitely a very worrying time now. I'm sad to say, kind of expected for Saints fans, I reckon. But we'll look at the next one, D's being beaten by the Hawks by 35. This looked like a closer game than it actually was.
Well, at the end of the third quarter, it was just a 1-point game.
Yeah.
So Melbourne were right in it, but then Hawthorn just flexed their muscle. They finally sort of kicked accurately, even though it was still 5-6 in the last quarter.
Yeah.
but it just showed.
Oh, there it is. There's the first one.
Yeah. It just showed how much clear the talent difference was, I thought. Like, they just said, yeah, we're the better team, and we'll show it.
Exactly. So. And funny enough, this actually ended up being the largest margin. The theme of the week, as many a different people will say, is that the lowest margin or combined margin, I think, since what, 20...
So it's the lowest...
It was a long time. It was a fair bit ago.
Average margin, I think, since like the 70s.
Yeah.
But for a 9-game round, it's the lowest ever at 10.33.
Yeah, insane. So... an incredible round. You'll hear it from everybody that this round was so entertaining. Games we didn't expect to be close were close. And this was probably the only outlier. And even then, you could argue that the D's made it really close and made that an entertaining game too. Essendon defeating the Swans. Now, this game has put a lot of people on the high chair for Essendon. They really see good things coming from this team. And I think there's areas that you can be really excited about, like the fact that Nate Caddy seems to finally be starting to show the upside that everyone was really excited about. You've got him alongside Isaac Kako. Kako is slotting in really nicely in that Essendon forward line. I even look towards the VFL and Sardis is finally starting to look like he's getting his, I guess, shape, right? I think he picked up 42 disposals over the weekend in his game in the VFL. So that could potentially see a call up for him. But just in general, Essendon stomping on Sydney basically in that first half and letting them come back. So there are definitely things to worry about, but a positive sign. Nonetheless, I think a lot of people could have seen Sydney taking this one.
Yeah, from what I've noticed, the last 2 games, they've started out really strong. But after the first quarter and a bit, they really struggled to score. Like, teams just get on top of them. And they've defended really strongly as a group. Yep. Like, you look at what Zach Reid's done. He's been really good. I think he took 7 intercept marks against Sydney.
Yep.
So part of that's obviously their forward struggle. But it was a really impressive performance from him. He's showing some really good signs. He was their one player from their 3 that they picked that we were both, like, hold out on.
Yeah.
Because he could still be really good. I've just still got issues with how they play. As I mentioned, their first quarter was really strong. I think they scored 30 plus in both games in the first quarter. They didn't score more than 70 or something combined out of the other 2 games. Like, it just, after that, there needs to be a lot of improvement, I think, with how they play.
Of course. Things to look on both sides. Suns beating the Dogs at TIO State. I'll start that again. Suns beating the Dogs at TIO Stadium up in Darwin. This one looked to be a Suns runaway, and then the Dogs started pipping back at it late. Nearly got to within 3 points. And then the Suns finally doing what I think not many people have seen them do for maybe even ever, and just grit their teeth and get to the end. So a fantastic win for Gold Coast, and honestly an honourable effort from the Dogs. 100%. Things to look out for, definitely some things, but they're young bloods. Really starting to show their improvement, really starting to show that they are AFL talent, and a really good game overall. Fantastic game up in Darwin. Anything you'd like to add?
I believe they're 7-0 over their last 8 or 8-0 or something up there.
Fantastic.
Over the last 4 years. I think something like a couple of efforts they made that we haven't seen from Suns players before. Caleb Graham looked to have popped his shoulder out, and then he continues to go and win the ball. Like, you didn't see that before from some of the younger players. Mm-hmm. And I think that really shows that Suns are there to fight.
Yep.
We've seen it a lot. We've seen the chit-chat between players. But we're now starting to see the results, which is really promising.
Good that they're getting these close games for sure. Now we've got the Saturday night showdown, what a lot of people are now calling to be a standalone game after how good this one has been and how good the last few have been, really. Port being beaten by the Crows by 5 points in another fantastic game. This one, I think, headlined the most by the fact that Connor Rozee is the first player in the showdown to win the medal.
Was he the first?
He's the first to win it in the losing side of the showdown, I believe is what it is. But some good things. Thilthorpe back to his best. He looks really good off the half back now. Rozee seems to be getting the most active he's been in a really, really long time, because I think he was starting to get kind of overshadowed by the likes of Butters. Horn Francis had even had games where he was starting to get more touches than him, and it's nice to see Rozee doing a bit more. But other than that, I'll try and keep this game to a minimum, because I think while there's a lot to say, we can basically just say this was the showdown. Anything could have happened. It was a fantastic game and almost always delivers.
Yeah. I mean, we actually both had Crows winning.
Fantastic.
So we both got it right. And I think they were the better team. I don't think 5 points was the difference of how they played.
How it felt,
Yeah, I think Crows were the much better team, but showdowns can just do anything, and that showed this week.
Yeah, and then we move to what is literally a Super Sunday. Starting off at the MCG, a game no one expected to really be entertaining. Tigers beating the Eagles by 2 points. I think we both... Did you say the Eagles won this one? I think I said Tigers.
I said the Eagles would win by 9. You said it's a draw, and that if it was...
I was really close.
I'd give you $30.
I was really close. But this one obviously headlined by Tom Brown's game-saving tackle.
Yeah.
My favourite part about this was after the game, all the commentators are getting all the Toms mixed up. It's just fantastic. So the person he tackled was Tom Gross.
Yes.
Tom Brown was the one who made the tackle. And they just kept getting them mixed up. And also, they weren't sure whether it was Gross or Gross. So, I think I saw Tom Morris every single time he mentioned him go, Tom Gross. And so he'd cover his bases. I knew what he was doing. But fair enough at the same time. Just glad it was entertaining. Eagles fans, unfortunately, they remain without a win.
Yes.
That's it.
And guess who they come up against this week?
Who?
The Saners.
Oh, yeah, good luck with that.
Kill myself.
We'll move to GMHBA. This was a battle of the streak.
Yeah.
They both had come in winning 4 games at GMHBA in a row, and somehow the Giants do it again. That's 5 on the trot at GMHBA, beating them again in a thriller. 4 points. This was a fantastic game.
Tip the Giants. I take that every day of the week.
Absolutely. Riccardi ended up being the game winner. However, Hogan 100% man of the week.
Jesus Christ.
100% Hogan man of the week.
Don't spoil.
I haven't got them listed down here.
What are you doing, mate? What are you doing?
Believe it or not, my focus is on the upcoming segment. That's where most of my focus has been. But Hogan would be my man of the week. 7 goals, a fantastic performance, and showing why he is Coleman favourite. He is the best forward in the league at the moment. And Cats, honestly, not much to really get too worried about. It just seems to be Giants know how to play at GMHBA and no other team does.
Yep.
Jimmy Bartell gave some really, really good insight into how teams usually should play against it. There's almost like a launching zone. They need to get it to a certain point and then put it in deep into the Geelong's backline. And once it's in there, it's really hard to get it back out. So he's almost told teams, right, get it to that center circle forward 50 section and go and launch, because then it's very tough to get out. So that's a nice little insight into that I'd like to bring up. But finally, the game that I don't know how to feel about.
This is all you.
I went to this game, North drawing to the Lions. The very first draw of the year, and it's first v 17. I'll keep it short because we're a little over time for this starting bit, but oh, man. Heartbreak it felt like, because I truly believe we outplayed Brisbane that game. 100%. 100%. First quarter, first half, right, went to Brisbane's way. That third quarter and fourth quarter was fantastic. Brisbane kicked their goals in that fourth quarter. It felt like against the run of play. So that's how they managed to stay in it. And again, it feels like North still doesn't know how to win, but at least we walk out of it with points. We'll take that against the reigning premiers. We'll take that against number 1, 100%. I got to go to this game, and it was an absolute blast. The people of Tassie are fantastic. They gave us hints as to where not to go. They had towns that they're like, don't go to this one after the game.
What were your thoughts on Tasmania as a whole?
Tasmania as a whole, okay, so bit of a mixed opinion, right? Arena, fantastic. One of my favourite. I love it much more than Marvel. Mm-hmm. I think MCG it's probably one of, if not the best stadium in Australia. Maybe Victorian bias, but look, I love the MCG. Blundstone, or Ninja Stadium as it's known now, is fantastic. It feels like a local ground right on the sea line, and it is so, so nice, and everyone there's great. You could literally roam around the place. Me and Cardi, who I went with, had general admission, and we could literally go everywhere. It was great.
It's pretty good.
It was great. It's a fantastic ground. I love it. Hobart itself, though, a bit boring. Not much to say.
Hobart and Tassie, clash of the shit.
The people... The people of Tassie, though, they were fantastic. It was, it was a great time. I had lots of fun. But we'll leave it there. We're going to get into the exciting part now. Really, really excited to jump into our very first guest to have on Zero Access Footy. We've got an interview with Dylan Alexander. We're going to have a chat regarding AFL draft, right? We mentioned a lot about, West Coast is one to talk about, as they are still winless. They look to be the leaders for the number 1 draft pick. And we're going to have a bit of a further chat with Dylan Alexander, or at least I will be. Unfortunately, Behm was not able to join. But I'm really excited to see how you guys look at this.
Don't get a jump scare when Rhys is on this side as well.
Yes, I know. It'll be a bit weird.
Don't get a jump scare.
It'll be a bit weird me being on the other side. But again, I'll say now we appreciate him jumping in and joining us for this one. And we hope that you guys enjoy the valuable stuff that he has to say. So we're going to jump into it. Thank you guys very much for joining us today. I am very, very grateful to be joined here by Dylan Alexander. You are our first guest on Zero Access Footy, and I appreciate you spending some time with me here today.
Happy to be here, mate. Yeah. Keen to chat about the draft and go through everything.
Exactly. Unfortunately, I don't have Behm next to me at the moment. He is feeling a little under the weather. You would have probably heard that at the start, but for those just listening into this clip, I do not have my co-host here, so it is up to me to try and bring his knowledge because, like I said to you beforehand, he's kind of the draft guy. So I'll do my best to try and fill that role in for him. But we'll get started. First off, more about yourself. How did you kind of get started following AFL draft content? What kind of brought that into you?
It's a weird story. Like a lot of things kind of coalescing at the same time. So I was living overseas.
Yep.
Moved back home, and one of the ways I sort of reintegrated back with friends and stuff was getting back through football. Everyone's watching it. Everyone's involved with it. So that was kind of my in. So I started watching a lot more football. And at the same time, because I was moving back from overseas, I was essentially like looking for a different career. I was teaching English over there. So kind of went into some media stuff. I was making videos, doing stuff like that. And it just kind of all happened at the same time where I was doing a lot of football. And I just had one day, kind of got up, had this idea that I wanted to have a look at the draft. It was a bit of an interest. Took a camera along to one of the under-18s games, and that's pretty much how it started.
Yeah, so like from that moment you found the love just purely in the draft aspect, like almost watching them before they get to that like AFL stage.
For sure. And it's probably like that sounds a little bit of a simple thing. Like I did see in the content space, content that I was watching and that sort of thing, that there was probably a little bit of a market in the draft.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of different people following it, and the ones that were following it were probably doing the same sort of thing. And I thought you could bring, maybe a different lens to it as well.
Yeah, fantastic. You did mention that it was something you were overseas, right? And did you find yourself following football as a kid? Were you just a casual fan as a kid, or was it when you came back as that implementation with your friends to kind of enjoy football again, find something new?
I think I was always a big footy fan.
Yeah, fantastic.
So played as I was growing up, moved away and probably lost a little bit of a touching point with it just because I was, the distance, you're not watching the games every week and stuff like that. So lost it a little bit, but then sort of coming back, it all comes back. It's sort of like riding a bike.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're sort of like straight back into it, and I kind of got the love for it again. So
may I ask what year you came back to being a football fan? Because you're a North fan, right? So did you come back during the awful stages, or did you come back when we were still kind of on that?
Is this not bad now?
It could always get worse.
This is rock bottom, right? No,
surely it's rock bottom.
So I moved. The first year I was over was like 2014. So I think we were still sort of kicking around the finals at that time.
Yeah, that was, I remember that.
I still remember having a conversation with my dad while I was over there. And we just played Richmond and beaten them in a elimination final, I want to say.
Yes, no, I do remember. That was the Ben Cunnington
tackle. Yeah, that one. So that was sort of when I left and then came back 2022, so just after COVID. So I've kind of missed a lot of the losing. And I don't know, like, it's a little bit funny for a person who's been away from it for that long, and then we are in such a slump. It's sort of, you lose a bit of contact with it, and it just, I don't know.
Well, you just tell yourself, right, that you're there for the bad times, and then once we're good again, you can use that as kind of your leverage to why you're not a bandwagon fan.
Exactly. And I am also Tasmanian, so I always have that to fall back on as well.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, beautiful. Tassie's a lovely place too. Went there recently, so fantastic. But I'll try and push this away from North Melbourne, as I have a tendency of doing too much. What specifically about the draft interests you the most, right? Because there's so many aspects to watching these kids get better to the point that they're reaching that AFL standard. Then the hype before they get drafted. Is there a certain point in covering that's most enjoyable? Do you just enjoy the general layout of the AFL draft and what that means for certain clubs?
I just think the amount of kind of touch points that go into it are so interesting. Like, you've got all of the data, their athleticism, that side of it. You've got the the statistics. Like if you were just picking it based on, and I think that's one area where people can go into. It's like the guy that gets 30 disposals in the midfield.
Yeah.
You know, draft that guy. That's the best player. But there's all of that sort of data. But then there's kind of also like building the story, so there's just so many aspects to it. So
Yeah.
I look at when I kind of nut into that sort of building a story thing, you look at a player like Patrick Cripps, excuse me. He, in his draft year, he grew a lot.
Yeah.
So as he was sort of coming through 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, that sort of area, he was just a smaller kid, pretty much the same size as everybody else. And he was able to, almost like in an ecosystem, like in the world, he was able to sort of adapt to that. So he had to not rely on his physicality. He had to, get the ball in close, use his hands, all of those sorts of things. And then when he did get that growth spurt, it sort of turns him into this.
Turns him into all-encompassing
player. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's part of it as well. So you've got all of that data, the athleticism, but then you've also got the story of the player, their background, where they come from, their family, and all of that sort of stuff. So I just find the whole thing, putting that all together is fascinating.
No, absolutely. And it almost creates stories that you wouldn't find I think in specific to the Paddy Cripps case, right? How many times have you heard those types of stories where you very rarely hear an AFL player? I think the only one I can think of is Riley Thilthorpe, where like they just change in stature and nature so dramatically. So those types of things come out of nowhere. And then of course it's a national game and you've got all these kids continuously getting better. So new names pop up. And I think, the storyline, like you mentioned, is fantastic too.
And you've got different states as well, different leagues, the competitiveness of those leagues. So it's really interesting. And then you get to watch the national champs. They all come together. But like on the flip side to that, what I said about Patrick Cripps, you can kind of get the opposite of that as well. If you're a giant and you're physically better than everyone else, maybe you don't adapt to all those inside skills and little things because you don't have to. You can rely on your physicality. So it's fascinating, and probably I think most footy fans have some interest in the draft, even passively. Yeah, like they'll talk about it. Who do you reckon is going to be better out of these two young players? Like it's kind of always in the. It's
almost like a superiority battle in a whole nother sense off the field.
Yeah, and everyone's got an opinion on it. I mean, you post something on Instagram like a redraft or something, everybody wants their say on it. So yeah,
that sounds like a fun little tale that you can always explain to people.
Yeah, exactly.
This person didn't like my opinion again.
Exactly, and everyone. I mean, that's kind of the beauty of it. Everyone's got their opinion. Yeah, so there's no right or wrong.
Fantastic. Well, I think in the sense, we talk a lot about AFL, especially on this podcast and especially on your channel yourself. Are there other sports that maybe affect the way that you cover Australian football? In sense, maybe NBA with a lot of hot takes and headliner opinions that really try to grab people's eyes straight from the beginning, or maybe even more in the less eccentric way. Are there other ways that you take other sports or other sports that you're interested in that you use in your content creation?
For sure. I think probably the biggest one for me, and it's because I'm into this sport a bit more, but definitely like the soccer, European soccer, is probably the biggest one that I take from. I'm interested in. It's fundamentally the two sports are too different to be able to compare, right?
Yeah, I get you.
In the sense that you want to be able to build those teams, like in a football team, in a soccer team, that is, you're able to kind of build the team. Every player can potentially be like world class. There's only 11 spots to fill.
Exactly.
You're creating players from like all over the world. So there's so much talent. Whereas AFL, you've got to look a little bit more to the top end of your team. You're probably only going to have 5 really, really talented players in the team.
Yeah.
As far as like making the content and how that goes, I probably do lean off some of those people. I mean, probably how I got into the whole content creation in the first place is those channels like True Geordie, like the Kickoff and all that sort of stuff, the Club, those sorts of shows. So definitely influenced by those people, but I guess you've still got to kind of get that back to Australian audiences, right? Like you've got to think about the sensibilities. I think Australians tend to be a little bit more like community based and like their local football, and are a little bit more inward thinking in that sense than some of those, and you've got to take those things as well.
Yeah, fantastic. I think in regards to the European soccer, right, I almost want to kind of dive away from, looking at that aspect. In terms of some of the things happening in the soccer, is there any relation at all to what it brings to the AFL right? So the way that they cover the soccer over there, and especially, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is the large money sums that they get over there compared to our game. Obviously, because it's a world game, it's going to bring money in there. Do you bring any comparison to the way you will maybe cover some of the I guess, draft over here, in the sense of their system being more of a purchase a player and do all your scouting there? They don't really have that type of draft system. So do you try and take the small aspects from that sport and then bring it to this draft sport?
Definitely, as far as the talent ID aspect.
Yeah.
And I think particularly one thing that soccer is really good for is you look at a player, like you look at a midfielder and you look at the attributes that they need to be able to do it. And I think soccer's really simple for this. You probably need an attacking midfielder that's really good on the ball.
Yeah.
You need that sort of like box-to-box guy that's super athletic, and then a defensive guy that can probably spray the ball around a little bit, but he's also got that, defensive mongrel in him and those sorts of things. And I think you can bring that specialization that soccer has, because it is much more of a specialized, each position has different attributes. I think you can bring that to the AFL, which tends to be a sport where it's a little bit more all-encompassing. Like every player, you want them to sort of do bits and pieces, flip around. 1 minute you have a midfielder that's playing in the forward half of the ground. They might go to half back.
Yeah.
Everyone's chopping and changing, and it's kind of modular. So, but at the end of the day, they still do have those primary positions. So you can sort of bring that stuff into it. And I find like the positional play and stuff like that of soccer, you can take a little bit from that. As far as the entire draft system, like soccer's completely different in that sense, right?
Yeah.
So you're doing transfer fees. You can kind of, how much money your club makes dictates the quality of player.
Exactly. And that's kind of what I was, interested in the most, because their whole system is completely different to the way that AFL does their thing, obviously playing with a lot less money. So I'm very interested to see how you'll almost judge clubs using their picks and using their money when it comes to that type of stuff.
There's just in general a lot less player movement in the AFL as well.
That too, yeah.
So you don't have the opportunity to be able to trade and bring players in from other clubs as much. Like obviously we have our trade period, but ultimately you are going to have to come to the draft quite a bit.
Yeah.
And that's where it probably becomes a little bit more like the American sports a bit more. You're thinking, NFL, you look to those sports. But again, even AFL, it's quite different to the NBA just because of the fact that we don't have the college system as well.
Yeah, and I think that's, I love that it makes it unique. It makes it a whole unique process, and I love the way that you can kind of cover that while it seems that you are bringing other aspects into it and making its own thing. So.
Yeah, for sure. You try to as much as you can, and obviously those sports who have, had a system for longer, there's more money in the game, which means they can look to different avenues.
Yeah.
I mean, they were using data a lot earlier than what the AFL was, for example.
Yeah.
So being able to go to those things, pull those triggers, and like you can learn a lot from those sports for sure. And if you look at the best people in the AFL, that are the movers and shakers, they've generally looked to the States for their sort of, draft IQ.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, to keep it on the personal stage, right, we talked about your influence through other sports. I wanted to ask maybe, I don't think it's too personal of a question, but more an idea as to your career path, right? Do you kind of wish to make this more like a professional full-time work? I'm not sure what it looks like in terms of your week, and I'm not going to ask you to personally lay out your week for me.
No,
but
that's cool.
In the sense of this work and what you do and the studying that you do for the AFL draft, do you wish to get to a certain stage where it's your number one reliance and monetarily? Do you wish to get to the point where you're recognised a bit more within like the most professional manner of AFL draft analysis and scouting and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the idea. I guess like you've got to build that up over time. At the moment, I'm sort of doing it at the moment. Like I've come out of study. I'm still sort of just doing this now. This is like the second year. Last year I was studying alongside doing it.
Yeah.
So this is kind of my first year of doing it full time, and it's a lot of work.
Yeah, like, absolutely. Well, it's research, it's study, right? People, if you're to be taken seriously, people need to know that you're doing the research and putting in the hours to know that you know what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
So I'd imagine it's got to be a lot of countless hours of watching film and watching notes and reading data and stuff like that.
Watching a lot of games, particularly. Probably one thing that I've changed a little bit over the last kind of 6 months is probably looking at stats a little bit less.
Yeah, okay, I get you.
Just in the sense of just sort of using your eye, making more notes about what players do at particular times in games and those sorts of things, rather than just using, relying on data. But certainly like doing this, like you have to watch tons of football.
Absolutely.
And that's if you're a recruiter or you're kind of working in the media, and you need to be across the AFL as well, because you need to know what those teams, and you need to be able to see, for context, the difference between the different leagues as well. You know, you've got the AFL there. How is that different? Like, how is that different to VFL football, to lower league football? What is fundamentally, like, what sort of athleticism and things do the players need, the skills that they need to be able to step up to that level? And you kind of got to be working that. And that's changing all the time as well. So you kind of got to adapt to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think from there, I want to ask, how does your weekend look? Because I'd imagine that's probably your busiest time period, correct?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So weekend is, I mean, it's probably most of the time it's 2 games of footy a week. Like, it's one on Saturday and it's one on Sunday, just because you can't get to...
Yeah, you wouldn't be travelling everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there'll be sometimes, if you're lucky, you get a double header.
Yeah.
So you have 2 games at the same ground, back to back.
Fantastic.
And you can do that. That's
Makes life
wonderful.
easier.
Yeah, I think they had one of those in round 1 from memory. They've had a couple of others like that, but most of the time you're just getting 1 game. And if you drove to the other one, you'd have to miss half the other one. So you just do 1.
Yeah.
Essentially. And then you'll go home, you'll watch whatever's come up on the streams. And then Sunday, you'll pretty much go again. So at the moment in the schedule, it's looking sort of like APS footy, like school football of a Saturday, and then Coates Talent League of a Sunday. And that's like another aspect of it as well. You sort of
absolutely.
You get this exodus in the middle of the season from the Coates Talent League, which is sort of your main league here.
Yeah.
And then everybody starts going into school footy. You got to keep an eye on that as well.
Oh, mate, it sounds like a lot. Do you do it just by yourself? Is this a solo venture, or do you bring other people along?
I do have help from my wife. So she does, like, we do some video content, some photography and stuff like that. So
Fantastic.
at the game, she does that for me, which is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And when we sort of like do streams and videos, she kind of helps me on the back end with a bit of that stuff. But other than that, it's solo, yeah.
Well, the help is always appreciated, I'd imagine.
For sure,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And you mentioned you go back and doing all the studying from home while you're there. Is it simply note-taking while you are at the games? Are there very simple things that you leave yourself to so that you can properly take in and ingest everything that you're seeing from the game? Or is it a whole load of different things you're trying to grab while you're there?
Yeah, so it's pretty much like note-taking little moments in the games,
Yeah.
like the decisions, if you notice something good, but also being able to like notice something bad as well, and then sort of keep note of that. I usually go back and put that into a spreadsheet, which is sort of weighted on different attributes.
Yeah.
And then I can sort of work through some sort of a ranking system of the players. And obviously you take into consideration positions and where you think they're going to go at the AFL level, potential upside with their like athleticism. So maybe they don't do some of those fundamentals very well, but you know, they're 195 centimeters. They can, you know, run like a 400 meter run and stuff like that. So you're sort of like weighing everything up, but through the games, it's pretty much like note taking of what they're doing. And then being able to understand like the seriousness of the moment in the game. And I think that's one thing too, when you're watching all of these games, you've got Coates League, you've got some sort of representative footy as well, but that APS football is really important for that as well, because it's probably a little bit more on the line in those games. Like every game really matters, whereas Coates League sort of doesn't, to be honest, for most of the season. And then you get to finals and it does matter.
And that's when it starts to ramp up.
Yeah. So you've kind of got to watch games with all of that in mind as well.
Okay. So in that sense, right, do you find yourself like looking out for key matchups during those not so serious times to kind of really get an idea as to how they may play when they get to a competitive level, right? They're coming up against talent that's also trying to get themselves to the AFL. Do you try your best to prioritize certain games, or is it just whatever game you can get to, you go and you try and work something out?
I mean, there's obviously a logistical ease of sometimes you will just take the low-hanging fruit as far as like what's easier for you logistically. But no, definitely you look across those APS games, if there's a lot of players that you really want to see and you want to see in that particular game, like you definitely pick that.
Yeah.
And so, same with the Talent League, really. Like it was last year, there was a lot of Sandringham Dragons games going to those just because they had so many players. So you get to see more at a particular time. But then again, you do have to watch all of the teams because you've got to be looking for guys that are coming through as well. You don't want to just get stuck just looking at the top guys.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. And maybe that influences exactly what games you go to, right? If you've kind of got notes on certain players, correct?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And then it gets a little bit easier as it starts to narrow towards the finals. You get less games. They do tend to play those double headers and you get to watch more footy anyway. So
yeah, fantastic. Beautiful.
Kind of works it out for you.
Yeah, exactly. Next up, I kind of want to see where your head goes in terms of your own work compared to others, right? Do you find yourself comparing your draft notes or your analysis to other people's analysis? Do you try and strictly stay in your own mind so that you know what your opinion is, you're not basing it too much off of others? Or are you happy to kind of work around what other people are saying as well?
It's a good question. I definitely look at what other people do, but I do feel like with the sort of methods that I have now that I've sort of worked over, particularly coming into this year, I think I've been a lot more, maybe in that sense, like a bit more of a front runner with the rankings and stuff. I've been able to get that out first because I can sort of trust the system that I have, like putting it into rankings, being able to put all the data in that I want to, the moments, and consider all of that and come out with some sort of a genuine ranking. And that makes me not really have to look at anybody else's rankings.
Yeah.
Obviously, like, you have a look. like if Cal Toomey drops a ranking or something, you have a bit of a look to see who he's got there.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt, do you find yourself almost backing off some of your thoughts because of what people like that say?
I think sometimes if you see one that's a real outlier and you see like, geez, got that guy high.
Yeah.
You do sometimes question, what have I missed?
Yeah.
And you will go back and have a look at those things. But on some level, you have to trust yourself, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I get you.
You have to, and I think that's with my content, that's what I've tried to do, not go off, I guess, like what you hear. Because when you start to like operate in these circles, you talk to people, you hear things off recruiters. This club likes this guy. I'd sort of rather keep it as me, as sort of an individual, and it's my opinion.
Yeah.
Not necessarily like I'm reporting on it, but I'm actually like immersive, if that makes sense.
No,
like
I get what you're saying. No, I understand.
I'm sort of a recruiter on the ground as a content creator.
Yeah. I think talking on that, I kind of want to get a bit deeper now into some of the current headlines or storylines going on within the AFL draft scene, because obviously this is stuff that you keep on top of, and it would be really nice to maybe hear some of your aspects that maybe you haven't even been able to get to on your platforms, if you're okay with that.
Totally, mate. Totally. It's free game.
Yeah, that's it. So first, I want to talk, very recently it was announced that Tassie is going to be getting some compensation picks. Compensation in the sense that, they're starting off, but they are getting picks 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, and 13, with some of them being restricted to just being traded. It's somewhat similar to North's draft concession that I think you would have mentioned before. Do you have any general thoughts on the idea? Do you think it's a good little draft hand that they've got? Do you think it's almost overdoing it? Anything like that?
I think that it's important for that Tasmanian side when they come into the AFL to be competitive. I think it's a little bit different to the situation with the New South Wales teams and the Queensland teams coming in, just because they were going into new markets and they didn't really have any fans on the ground anyway.
Yeah.
When they first sort of hit the road. So they sort of build them up over time. It was more of a young player pool. I think with this, it's quite good how they're sort of forcing them into making some of those trades, but they are still going to get top end talent. I think from what I've read and what I saw, they were going to get picks 1, 3, and maybe 5 that they didn't have to trade. And then it was after that they were trading.
I'm not 100% sure. I can get one of the other boys to quickly fact check that and write that down for me. But
sure.
I believe, I think I just saw a thumbs up. So yes, you are correct.
yeah. It was something along those lines anyway. But I don't think it's overkill. I think you do need, when you have those teams coming in, like they do need to be able to hang their hat on something. They need some big players, and the fact that they're going to be able to trade those picks or have to trade those picks will force them, I think, into getting some, ready-made players, some stars from other clubs and that sort of thing. So no, I think it works. And as long as, I think for Tasmanians that are down there, they're probably going to need to see.
They're going to need a reason to see that team. Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
Because Tasmanians are already affiliated with other clubs, like myself, a North fan, being Tasmanian. So they kind of need a reason to be able to go to the footy and sort of support that team, and I think that'll help.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned and touched on the way that the other teams have been made. So GWS and Gold Coast, I think you said Sydney team, so GWS in particular.
Yeah.
But both Gold Coast as well, right? Comparing this to their situation, do you believe that they maybe have done it better? Because obviously both sides started off their seasons, Gold Coast probably in a lot worse of a way. They haven't made finals yet, but both of them started off as wooden spooners in the first year.
Yep.
And maybe we've come to expect that from expansion teams, but do you think maybe that the way they had worked with GWS and Gold Coast, this is a bit better. It's going to give them a bit more of a chance to be competitive from the get-go?
I think so. I think it's a little bit more in line with like the GWS model too, in that they're going to have to get quite a number of ready-made players. If I think back to, I think Gold Coast more went down the model of taking like one big name player, taking Gary Ablett, of course, and then pretty much relied on the rest being kids. And I think you're going to need a lot more diversity in the leadership. And I think ultimately those two clubs, like GWS, who have been not successful in winning a premiership, but they've been on-field successful. The way, like what it's all going to come down to essentially is how the club is set up.
Absolutely.
From a management point of view, from like a culture point of view, when they bring in clubs, like bringing players, getting those players to be able to stay there, enjoy their time in Tassie and sort of make it a destination club. I think that's most of the modern teams that are successful and doing well have an element of that. You look at Geelong and the Giants are doing it really well up there. They're not really getting too many players leaving unless they're kind of like pushed out of the side or something like that.
And the way that they also have managed to create talent through their, I believe their NGAs, and is it the NGA that they've used? They have a really nice talent pathway is what I'm trying to kind of get at.
So the northern clubs get their own academies.
That's it.
So the difference, you mentioned NGA. The NGAs are for the traditional football states.
Yes.
The clubs of those teams, and they get them if the player's from a diversified background. So parents are born overseas, Indigenous backgrounds, like Jamara Ugle-Hagan as an Indigenous player, he was an NGA to the Western Bulldogs. The northern clubs get their own full academies, so they get full access to all the players that they recruit from their zone. So that's kind of the difference maker there. Tassie, as I understand, they'll be more along the NGA path as they're a traditional
footy state is what you're trying to say. Beautiful. That's why we have you on, because my lack of draft knowledge was showing there a little bit.
Totally fine.
Yeah, beautiful. On top of that, right, the way that Tassie is going to draft, do you think, it may be thinking way too far ahead, the way they're going to draft, do you think they're going to aim to draft Tassie talent through their NGA? Like, try and put as many of their NGA talent with those picks that they own to begin with? Are they going to try and look out for them? Or do you think they'd look for best talent available? Because you mentioned how teams sometimes struggle and the culture around a club will struggle to keep players around because they're not a winning club or they want to go back home, whatever it may be. Do you think Tassie works on building that culture first? Or do they look for best players available to be competitive as possible?
This is a multifaceted question. I think on some level, you have to look at best available talent because there's just not enough talent coming through for all of, 18 clubs.
Yeah.
Most of the talent they're pulling from is coming out of Victoria anyway.
Yeah.
So like Tasmania's not going to be able to support itself going for local talent purely. So they're going to have to go for the best available players. Now, one thing that interstate clubs have done with drafting is rather than go for players out of Vic Metro, they've gone for players out of the country and from other states because they tend to be less likely to want to come back.
Yep.
I don't fully understand why that's the case, but
I couldn't tell you.
yeah. Vic Metro kids, and sometimes that ends up just coming down to talent level. And if you're a high draft pick, you have a little bit more leverage to be able to move, right? So, but clubs like, I know Port Adelaide are one, the Giants are one that definitely do target. Like if they've got a 50-50 call, they'll target the kid from interstate or from Vic Country as opposed to Vic Metro. So that's something that they can look at. But ultimately with just the lack of talent across the whole board in any draft year, you're going to have to be taking
best available.
Yeah, because you'll get to a stage, if you're just going for local players or players from Vic Country, you'll just have a dearth there. You'll just have a hole at the top end of your team and other teams will be able to exploit that.
Yeah, understandable. I want to shift now to the most upcoming draft. You've talked a lot about it on your channel now because we are in the prime season of it all. We're ready to kind of look at all these players coming into the next year. Give us your thoughts on this upcoming draft. Do you think it compares well or poorly to the last, let's say, 5 drafts, right? It's probably going to be hard to compare it to most recent drafts because I've always gone under the understanding that you can't really give your opinion or your full opinion on a draft until about 4 or 5 years later because you don't know whether they may have a bounce back, whether they may drop off from their standard. But to your best ability, can you compare this draft to the most recent drafts up to about 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, I'd say it's looking so far, and again, it's difficult to know exactly what a draft looks like even at this point. Trying to look at it sort of like globally, I don't know, like until the national champs, because that's when you kind of get to see everyone play against each other. Even last year's draft, which was kind of called a super draft, people called it, even that early. It wasn't really called that in the front half of the year.
Yeah, okay.
People weren't really saying that until the back end of the year, and it started to look really deep. I would say this draft so far, it's more along the lines of like 2023, where you had some really top end talent at the end. Probably goes through until the first round, and then it's probably going to start to drop away. I think there's going to be a gap there, and clubs that have picks outside that sort of first round are probably not going to be as keen. There'll obviously be some good players that come from outside that, but it's more in line with 2023 than the depth of 2024. But, potentially with some of the talent that is up the top end of this draft, it's potentially better maybe in that top 5.
Yeah, okay. Do you find it difficult to rate players highly if they haven't played against those like best opposition players? Because as you mentioned, the Vic Championships, was it? That's usually where most of the excitement comes from, where they're playing the best of the best. Do you find it hard to then change positions drastically if we're in this part where they're still kind of getting themselves warmed up? Yeah,
to answer the question shortly, yes, it is difficult because you want... When you start to get into the national championship side of it, you're starting to... That's really getting to... The talent is good enough across the entire teams that we're looking like AFL standard. You can sort of roughly compare that to AFL. And people will talk a lot about the VFL, like VFL exposure being important. I would say that's less important than the national championships because your VFL guys, as much as they're bigger bodies, they're not as talented. Mm-hmm. So comparing them and looking at them, like that context is really important. So seeing them in the national championships is kind of, when you're building this picture, it is kind of everything. That being said, the best players are going to still stand out at Coates Talent League level. Like some guys you can see.
You can see they've got the goods to go.
Yeah. I remember like the Richmond recruiter last year talking about, he saw Sam Lawler, I think, in March and said he'll be the number 1 pick. Which he ended up being.
That's a crazy call out. Yeah. That's insane.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. But yeah, you can obviously see who's talented. But I think some guys that maybe aren't showing themselves yet, that national champs will be a big time for them to rise. So you'll get a few that come through at that point.
Yeah. Obviously it's early, but would you say there's any bolters or kind of people that have dropped off the early stages, sorry?
I would say, back to that conversation that we had a little bit earlier about bigger body players.
Yes.
Players with strength that can tend to dominate. Dyson Sharp is a player from South Australia who probably, since under 16s, has dominated this crop. Like he's been the best player in this crop the entire way through.
Yep.
I think the start of this season, you've seen that he's probably dropped a little bit. I think he's probably still in that sort of top 15, top 20 sort of a group. But everyone was, at the beginning of the season, everyone was saying he's going to be the clear number 1. But I think he's probably a slider at this point, just based on everybody else's rapid improvement. And he's probably just sort of plateaued a little bit.
Okay.
I look at someone like Rory Wright from the Sandringham Dragons, and I think this happens a little bit with those Vic Metro Talent League clubs where you don't get to see a lot of them in their bottom age year. The Vic Country teams, they'll probably get a little bit more exposure. The interstate clubs like South Australia, Western Australia, they'll get bottom age guys that'll play midfield minutes, in their bottom age year, where Sandringham Dragons won't. So Rory Wright's a big one for that. Wouldn't have got into that midfield last year that had Murphy Reid, Levi Ashcroft, these types of players in there. He's now stepped into that Dragons midfield and just looks amazing. He's got an unbelievable left peg, good physicality, good size for a midfielder, good overhead. So he's kind of got a lot of... He's probably one that's come into that top 10. And Sam Grill, Oakley Chargers, so a similar story. Didn't get exposure in the midfield. Looks like Chris Judd at the moment running around in the Coates League with his explosive speed. So, yeah, that's probably the biggest one so far.
Yeah, okay. Are you looking to watch those guys more often now, or are you kind of looking to see if there's others who may be moving up or down?
I think with those guys, it's sort of about consistency. I've sort of seen, particularly like their athletic ability, I can kind of see what they can do right about now. Champs will be big for me watching them.
Yeah.
Probably through this period of the season, though, I'm probably less watching them, and I'm more looking for guys that are pushing their case, coming through maybe those like kind of later bolters up until the national champs, and then you'll sort of go back to your bread and butter at the champs again, looking at those top guys to see how they go.
Yeah.
In with the quality that's around them.
So you're trying to get almost a full page picture at as many players as you possibly can to get the best look. And then once champs comes in, that's kind of like the ready to go. All right, let's finalize where these guys will end up in the draft type situation.
Exactly.
Beautiful.
That's exactly right. And yeah, other than that, you might even just see like a game that Sam Grill's in. I've seen a lot of him play in this front half of the year, but if there's a close game that he's in, I want to kind of see what he's doing in the big moments, in the last quarter. If there's a goal to be kicked on the line, what does he do at the stoppage? Those sorts of things.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm going to ask you one final question, and it's probably one that's way too early to ask in your field.
Love it.
But for the content, for the sake of the content, if you were to give me a top 5 prediction right now, your top 5 draft, right? And there's a lot to consider.
Yep.
Which team will take him? We'll go with the positions now. So we'll have West Coast would be 1.
Yep.
Richmond would be 2 because it's not North. Then it would be Richmond again at 3. Melbourne at 4 right now. And I can't remember who's in 13th. Let me quickly double check that.
Do a quick check and I'll start using my brain.
Yes, I will quickly do that for you. But yes, like I said, West Coast 1, Richmond 2, Richmond 3, Melbourne 4. Sydney's actually 5 right now. Sydney.
That's incredible. Well, so they're interesting too because they've got an academy. Do you want me to include academy players in this?
Can someone let me know very quickly, do Melbourne still have their pick? Is it Essendon's pick?
It is.
It's Essendon's pick.
That's Essendon's pick. Yeah. And North Melbourne's is Richmond.
Yes, so it'd be, unfortunately. West Coast, Richmond, Essendon, and Sydney. That is a crazy top 5 just off the bat.
So straight away there, like Sydney will not want to hang on to that pick.
Yeah.
Because they have an academy player. So they'll want to offload that to get points to be able to match on Max King, who is their kind of top guy. Okay, so West Coast, I'm still sticking with my number 1 guy, Cooper Duff-Tyler.
Yeah, the ruckman. That actually makes sense out of all of them.
It works for them.
Yeah.
I think Richmond would love to have him as well. He's just such an athletic specimen, this guy. Think Tom De Koning, but probably moves better, definitely kicks the football better, can pass the ball like a midfielder at
bloody hell
200 centimetres. So he's incredible. And I think he's got such physicality and competitiveness to his game. I think he really suits like the modern ruck and he'll be able to push forward.
Absolutely.
Do all of that. I'll still hold with Dersmer at 2.
Yep.
To the Tigers. I think that could change. He's been putting down some pretty big midfield performances this season. Like he had 36 in round 1. Went back in there at the weekend for Gippsland and had 28. He's pretty good. He's just such a smooth mover.
Yeah, lovely.
Runs like a gazelle.
Fantastic.
So much upside with Dersmer. Then you've got some academy guys. So you've got like Zeke Euland from the Gold Coast Academy.
Yep.
He'll get a bid somewhere in that top 5, I imagine. Max King runs a 20-metre sprint in like 2.8 seconds. And
so Sydney are keen to get him.
He's basically Isaac Heaney 2.0.
Fantastic. That's perfect for them.
Yep. They would love that. So I'll go to the main draw of the draft, if that makes sense, without those academy guys. Next, I'd have Sam Grill.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one I spoke about.
Yeah, it's the one
mini Chris Judd.
Yes.
Probably over-egging that a little bit. But
mini Chris Judd is crazy. But
like West Coast.
If it works, we can come back to this and say, look, I saw this coming from a mile away.
At the moment, he is running around in like the talent league and in school footy, literally just like showing guys the footy and like running around them. Like
oh, mate. I'll tell you what, this makes me want to go and watch them.
It's
it
really
makes me
fun.
want to go and see them.
It's really fun. And when you get a player like that, it's really fun to watch. It's absolutely amazing. The champs will be big for him, but he's right up there. And Josh Lindsay already won 2 best on ground medals in the academy games and also the futures game that was on grand final day. So he's awesome as well. He's a bit more of I'd say like a cerebral type player, not as athletically gifted, but just reads the game really well, sets up behind the play, kicks a footy really well, moves a bit like Pendlebury.
Yeah.
Like if you want a player comparison, but I don't want to put those lofty expectations.
The expectations. I'd imagine that's some of the hardest things to do.
It is, but when I say that, I don't want people to say like, oh, he's the next Scott Pendlebury. I just mean
he's got comparable features.
Exactly, and maybe positionally he could do that sort of a role.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Which sort of paints a picture. So, is that 5?
I think you mentioned 6 there. So it was what we had: Cooper, the ruckman.
Yep.
Second was William Dersmer. Third was
Grill. Oh, Euland. Yeah, Euland's academy though.
Yeah, Euland academy. Oh, we'll go third, then Grill.
Yep.
If we're going to ignore the 2 other pretty much expected guaranteed picks
Yep.
through academy reasons.
Yep.
Grill. Fourth was
Lindsay. And then I will go Oliver Greaves. He's the last one. So he is... I don't know if you're familiar with Josh Smiley from the 2024 draft.
I had actually heard you mention him before. He's with the Richmond boys at the moment.
Yep. So he went at, I guess it was pick 6.
Yep.
194 centimetre, enormous bodied midfielder.
Yeah.
Just a huge lump of a man.
And could be fantastic for their midfield in the future.
For sure. Just brings that, size and physicality and reach.
And Greaves is similar?
Very similar. So both of those players play for the Eastern Rangers. Obviously both playing for the academy side for Vic Metro, both wearing the number 26.
So that's going to be beef coming.
It's like a clone, basically.
That's scary.
yeah. It's a weird one. So he's 191, so he's a little bit shorter, but he's probably a little bit better overhead.
Yeah.
And I think he kicks the football just as well. So
fantastic. Well, there you go. We'll hopefully come back and we'll be spot on with our. We ended up going a top 7 or 8.
Yeah, if you include the academies.
Yeah, including the academies. Yeah. So we'll come back and see how it goes. But nonetheless, it's been a pleasure to have you on, and I'm really, really appreciative of the insight you've managed to give me and hopefully the people watching.
Thanks for having me, Rhys. Loved it.
Yeah, I hope to get you on later on towards the pointy end, if we championship side of things.
Exactly. If you go post the champs, a lot more info.
Yeah, well, we'll look to try and get you back on. And of course, if you haven't seen him already, be sure to go and check out Dylan Alexander over on YouTube. Are there any other social medias that you may want to shout?
Just Instagram, I guess.
Instagram?
Posting essentially trickle down in some ways. My Instagram from my YouTube, but doing sort of like the rankings and things like that and just player information. So anything that's happened with like injuries or anything like that, performances will be on there as well. So if you want the short form, go to Insta, long form, YouTube.
Absolutely. So make sure to go and check him out. And of course, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, all of that good stuff for Zero Access Footy. And we hope to see you again. And best of luck for the rest of the year. Obviously, you've got a big task ahead in the scouting process. So I wish you the best of luck. And I enjoy what you do. And I very much appreciate having you on.
Oh, thanks, Rhys. Thanks for having me.
So with that wrapped up, we are now going to jump into our round 10 preview. We're going to have a look at the games coming up with the, I guess, a little bit of insight now from the AFL draft. Do you reckon there's much we can bring into what we've got here? We mentioned that West Coast, they look to have number 1 pick. So this game here against it, I believe, is going to be against St Kilda.
Yeah, it is.
This one could be very interesting. Maybe they pick up a win. We'll find out. But we'll start off with our Thursday night headliner. We've got ourselves up at TIO Stadium in Darwin.
Sir Doug Nicholls Indigenous round.
That's it. Thank you for reminding me.
Yes.
But Suns versus Hawks. Who do you reckon is taking out this one? I think I know where we're going with this based off of pure track record at this point.
Yeah, I mentioned that they were like 7 or 8 and zip up there over the last few years. Their form's probably slightly better than Hawthorn's as well, I'd argue, and it was a really impressive win against the Dogs. So I struggled to put it past them not beating Hawthorn at the moment.
Yeah, agreed. I think right now, look, they've shown glimpses of lows, right? Their loss against Richmond, and so have Hawthorn. Hawthorn have had some really, really big games that we thought that they'd take, that they end up getting pumped in. So they've both got their question marks. I just think pure scenario right now up in Darwin, they're both in pretty similar form. I think pure scenario right now has this going the Suns' way. I'm going to say another contested one. I'm not going to go exactly the same as the Dogs game. I'm going to say this one gets to a goal. I think this one's 6 points. I reckon this could go really down to the wire, much like it did against the Dogs. Because again, another really, really formidable challenge here. But we move to Friday, Sydney versus Carlton. Now this one I'm really interested to hear about because right now, Sydney are the favourites betting odds-wise.
Really?
Sydney sit at $1.72. Carlton $2.13. It's
That's
at
really,
the SCG.
Yeah, okay.
So that's probably the thinking, right? They just beat GWS very recently at the SCG, so they could be picking up their form. But obviously, losing to Essendon is a big question mark on their end. And then Carlton coming off a win against St Kilda. You'd think they'd be right there. You'd think that they'd even potentially be favourites for this one. They're higher on the ladder. And I'd probably go Carlton's way with this one. I think Sydney have had too many signs of disappointing play. Carlton have finally started to pick up some form, despite, I think, the one loss in between it all. They had a nice win against St Kilda. their win against Geelong really showed something. Sure, you could maybe question how they play away, considering their big loss to Adelaide, but I think that was purely an effort perspective. I don't think this was due to a home field advantage. They just did not bring it against the Crows that game.
Yeah.
So I see Carlton taking this by 20.
Yeah, that's fair. The only concern I have would be McGovern's out, I believe. He got taken to hospital during the game.
Jesus.
Nick Haynes got a really heavy knock to his jaw, but was able to play it out. And also Blake Acres had a shoulder injury that he was also able to play out.
Yeah.
My only concern is if all three of those are unable to play.
At least one of them are.
Concern. Yeah. But yeah, it's really hard to go past Carlton at this stage. Their key backs are performing really well. And Sydney's forward line isn't that good. I don't think they get anyone back this week. I know Errol Goulden's still a fair whack away as well. So, yeah, I can't really fault the Blues at the moment. I know, as you said, that Adelaide game was poor, but they bounced back really, really well. So I'd go Blues as well, probably by 4 goals.
Fantastic. We'll move to the Saturday game. This one is going to be a really, really interesting test as well. Collingwood versus Kawana for the Indigenous round.
Mm-hmm.
This one's being played at the MCG, so there's the obvious Collingwood advantage there. But Adelaide have really shown some fantastic sides. I think this is going to be an absolute dogfight. I think it's going to go Collingwood's way. But man, this feels like a prime time for Adelaide to really, really rock up and shake some things up in the league.
100%.
If they take this really shapes a lot of perspectives because Adelaide sit 5th right now, and this win against 2nd, potentially a team who I think we're all expecting this team to sit top 4 at this point. Collingwood have been really showing it after last year's non-finals campaign. Right, this could be really, really good for them. So. That being said, like I mentioned before, I'm still going Collingwood, but I really, really have a think that Kawana could take this one in a fantastic, I don't think a shootout, but more a battle, right? This is going to get testy. I really feel like that's going to happen. So I'm going to go Pies I'm going to make it 2 goals, but open to so many possibilities. I just hope it's not a blowout. I really don't think it will be. I pray it's not a blowout.
Assuming that Collingwood do get some players back that they rested, I don't believe they had really bad front on the injury list this week.
Yeah,
I think it was pretty calm for them. We've seen some fantastic games between these two teams. I think over the last 5 or 6 games between them, there's been like 5 of them that have been within a goal.
Yeah.
It's prime time every time between these two. And I'm really excited. I think if Kawana do get over the line and are able to win this, they're guaranteed top 8. 100%. No doubt in my mind that that's the case. I'm not going to go as far as Kane Corns and saying I'd dye my hair like Rory Lobb and do a bit of a thing like that. But if they win, they make the 8, 100%.
Oh, I thought you were saying like Rory, like he had said that if Adelaide win, he's going to dye his hair. It's like, why would he do that?
No. He said if Gold Coast miss the 8, he'll dye his hair. So I'm doing the same thing with Adelaide.
Oh, well,
if they win.
Look, he can do what he wants.
So I'm going at Kawana. I think that it's a really good place for them to show that we are a finals level team.
And they've been close before. I remember a game specifically, Jordan Dawson missed out on the chance to kick after the siren.
Yep.
So they've had their opportunities before, and I think this is the best position both teams have been in when playing against each other. I'm almost certain. They're in very good spots. Next, we move to Adelaide Oval, where we've got Yata Pulti for Indigenous round and Geelong. Now, I am really unsure where to take this. I think we can admit that the Geelong GWS game last week was a bit of an outlier for how Geelong's been playing, purely based on, I guess, history between GWS and Geelong, right? A lot of people thought that GWS could take it, and they did. However, at Adelaide Oval, Port, look, they're coming off a decent game against the Crows, but I'm not confident really on either of these teams at the moment. I mean, I'd say more Geelong, but then I think they're in Adelaide. Port should be able to back in behind their boys. I don't know. I really don't know how to look at this one. I'm going to kind of listen to your perspective and see what you think.
To be honest, I don't really trust either team. Like, I'm agreeing with you on that.
Yeah.
Geelong have been whacked with injuries this year.
Mm-hmm.
They've got De Koning and Sullivan as their only 2 key defenders at the moment. Stewart's not there. Henry's not there. Stanley's out, so Blitzars has to play in the ruck. And the issue is, I don't trust Port Adelaide to play a consistent game at all. So they've got the talent and they're at home, so I'm giving them the 2-goal edge favour. However, I think Geelong are a 3-goal better team. So I'm going to go the Cats bounce back really, really well and are able to get over the top of the Yartapulti again, because they do have a bit of an edge over them at the moment. If you look at the prelim final, the qualifying final last year.
Yeah.
That was a big one.
Yep. Next up, we've got GWS versus Walyulup for Indigenous round. This is happening at NG Stadium. So a Sydney home game, and this is another interesting test for Freo. I feel like we've been giving them way too many passes and way too many opportunities for a test. This has been a really disappointing start, like incredibly disappointing start for Freo this year. They really expected to be better than this. I think we all expected Freo to be better than this.
100%.
And they have not shown the talent that they really should be bringing to the table. And I see this happening again. I honestly think this could get ugly. I think GWS take this by 50. I genuinely believe so. I think while at home, they could run over the top of them. Jesse Hogan could really get going in that back line. God, that's the most dangerous forward up against one of the most out-of-form backlines in the league. That could get really scary for Freo. For their sake, they hope that their matchups kind of work out well for them. But you look on one end right there, their combo of Alex Pearce, Luke Ryan. Luke Ryan, he's still got a lot of...
When you're talking about cheesy ball, he is arguably the front runner of cheesy ball.
There's a very good chance. He very much is... Well, I say it all the time, kick-to-kick merchant, because he seems to only take kick-ins and those swinging ones and tries to play his one-on-ones as much as he can and kill it there. But he's not been doing it very well this year. I think this could get quite ugly unless Freo's forward line can really start getting going. Tracy has not been as dominant as I think many people expected him to start off to be.
Not at all.
He hasn't played poorly, but I wouldn't say he's played to the ceiling that people
Not from what we saw last year at all.
Yep, Shea Bolton has been one that struggled to get going to start the year. Has had his flashes.
Yep.
But really, most of their good stuff in that forward line has come from their young guys. I think of Isaiah Dudley. I think of Murphy Reed. Right, there's small glimpses, but obviously those aren't enough. And then Sam Switkowski is just a weird one, man. I don't know what's gotten in with him. It's like he's really ridden off of one good year and has struggled to find that same effectiveness ever since. I think Switkowski, his future is looking very, very interesting. I'm wondering how he tries to improve himself, whether he needs a switch up.
Issue is he's a small forward who's a great pressure, really good, really quick small forward, but he doesn't hit the scoreboard.
Yep.
He's kicked 2 goals for the year. And when he does go up to the stoppage, he allows his opponent to get off him quite easily. So he's not providing forward impact. He's not providing defensive impact. He probably will be the one to get dropped when Walters gets back.
Yep.
So
agreed, 100%.
Yeah, I'm also leaning Giants pretty heavily. I'm going 40 points. I think Hogan kicks 5 again as well.
Easily could get 5+. Dogs versus Essendon at Marvel. Essendon coming off I'd say a pretty impressive win against Sydney. I think while Sydney have very much underperformed this year, they are still a team that on paper is a premiership contender. Obviously, they've lost a few from that list, but last year, coming off a premiership, they're just very much underperforming from their standard. The Dogs, however, are still very hard to go past. They are 6th right now. I cannot believe the Dogs are 6th. I really can't, especially considering I was so on them for being such a middle of the road club, and with their injuries, I'm like, this just seems like the perfect year for them to pull a Western Bulldogs and go dead set right in the middle, 9th place. But they are looking to be a team that's trying to push for top 4, which is insane. So I see them taking this one comfortably. I'd say 30 points, but there's going to be flashes from Essendon. As we've seen multiple weeks now from Essendon, we're going to see flashes from them. I think, though, Essendon are riding on a bit of a high, and they're underestimating just how good their run has been to start this year. Not to take anything away from them, I think to be 9th right now is a fantastic effort. But you mentioned it, I think previously, they have played no one, or they have not beaten anyone above them right now. Everyone they've won against has been below them. So this is going to be their test. If they win this one, they could be legit.
Yeah, this midfield battle could get really bad for Essendon. English has been great. He will get over Goldstein in every scenario.
Oh, God, it's scary in that one.
And aside from Merritt, like, this Bulldogs team could run riot and run rings around this Bombers outfit. So I think this is going to be an absolute demolition. I think this could be like 120 to 60. Jesus. I think this could be a proper whack around the park.
I mean, maybe. I have been one to say Merritt's been performing at potential Brownlow standards so far. So
I disagree.
If we can see that again with a bit of help like he got last week, with the likes of Nick Martin doing his thing, Caddy doing really well. Like he got some help last week, and that's how they managed to take down Sydney. They'll need to do it again.
Yeah. So you'd had Dogs by
30.
30. Yep.
Next, we move to Sunday. Richmond versus North to start the day, and I am so terrified for this one because after a draw against Brisbane, it would just be so North for them to lose to Richmond, the team who has our pick. They have our pick. We don't, even if we win this one, do we really win? Do we really win? It doesn't mean anything. They still get our pick. But for the sake of being a loyal North supporter, they're in some good form at the moment, despite only having a draw to their name in the last 3 games. I think they take this one. Although Richmond is so prone to a fantastic output in terms of effort. And if North come out with their performance like they did against Sydney, then Richmond could really... I'm so confident that Richmond could make this ugly. They just need their talent to start performing more consistently, and they could really start to string some really ugly games against us, at least, together. The game against Brisbane should give me hope, but I don't know how to have hope in this team, man. I really don't.
Yeah, we mentioned this. Like, they just don't know how to win.
Yeah.
Simple as that. Like... I don't think I've seen a worse performance from Brisbane for a long time. The way they were kicking the ball and you guys still couldn't capitalise. It's very frustrating.
Absolutely. I am going to say North, but I'm going to say North by 15.
I agree. I think it's probably going to be a bit more. Like, we haven't seen Richmond be able to put together multiple good performances in a row, and that's the only concern I have. They've now had 2 out of 3 weeks really good performances against Gold Coast. Now West Coast. And again, it's West Coast. I can't take much out of that game at all.
I just hope our general experience, not even premiership experience, general experience within our club now can put us over the line. We'll see how that goes.
I think, I'll go 40 because I just think this could be like a Melbourne type game where it's close and then you blow out.
It could be.
But you have to win this. There is no other option.
Have to. Absolutely. Brisbane versus Nam for Indigenous round. This one, I mean, first versus 15th, it should be pretty set in stone. It's at the Gabba this time. This should be Brisbane, 100%.
100%.
I'm going to say that last week was a one-off, and I'm going to say Brisbane by 50.
I probably agree, to be honest. I don't see... Melbourne were close against Hawthorn, but that was at the G. This is up at the Gabba.
Yep.
So that's a 5-goal advantage to Brisbane as a minimum. So I just see their forward line getting back to it. It was a tough trip down to Tassie too. They don't play there that often. And I just think that unless Max Gawn has the greatest game of all time, they got no chance of winning.
That's a fair point, but he's somehow done it a couple of times, it feels like, this year. Score, how long do you think the margin's going to be?
I'll go 50 as well.
Yep, fair enough. And then finally, West Coast versus... Walich
Marawar.
There you go. Mm-hmm. And Euroke. Fantastic. 18th versus 12th. St Kilda are $2 favourites, so $1.35 to $3.25. But I feel like you're not going to be very confident at all.
I'm so confident that we're going to lose that I'm putting money on West Coast to win.
Of course you are. Can you put it on this podcast too? Like, as in, if St Kilda win, then I get money. If West Coast win, then you get money. Yeah.
$10.
$10. Beautiful.
Love that.
Hopefully I can get my Mikey money back.
E-
I really hope so. We'll find out. But
I'll go Eagles by 11. I just think they're going to do it. It's the most St Kilda thing for us to lose. And that's the thing that I hate. It's the most St Kilda thing ever.
Yeah.
So, I live in my depression.
I'm going to go Euroke. Or St Kilda by 30. I'm going to go about 30.
If Mason would return, he always plays well against the Eagles.
Fantastic.
But we'll still lose.
All right, well, that's where we are going to end it for this episode. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed both this and our interview with Dylan Alexander. It was a fantastic episode we had today, and hopefully the first of many. And hopefully it's going to be the only one that I do by myself. Obviously, a very outlandish episode with you, unfortunately, falling ill. Who knows? Maybe next time I'll fall ill and you'll get the spotlight to yourself. You'll have a bit of fun there. But
I'm sure everyone would like that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course they would. You. Yeah, no, they despise me. But again, I appreciate you all so much for tuning in. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you are watching this on YouTube. If you are listening on Spotify, rate us 5 stars. And of course, be sure to follow us over on TikTok, Instagram, and I think that's it. Spotify. I did mention Spotify before, but follow us there, whatever it may be. Of course, just all our socials. It's always very much appreciated. Everything is also in the description too. I appreciate you all very much for tuning into this one. And I'll see you all in episode 13. We hit the teens next week. And I'm very excited to see what is in store news-wise for us next week. So appreciate you all once again. See you all very soon. Good.